Okay, so we're going to continue looking at absolute value equations. So remember, when you're presented with an absolute value, and this is kind of the last problem type we have here, so one of the more advanced ones, when we're starting with an absolute value, we want the absolute value to be all by itself on one side. So we don't want there to be numbers multiplied or divided. We don't want there to be numbers added or subtracted on the same side as that absolute value. We want it to move over to the other side here. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide both sides by -3. Another problem with this one is if we didn't divide by -3, if this maybe -3 wasn't here and we just started with equals -30, we would immediately say no solution because we can't start with a negative. Okay, so that's a big one. But once we divide by that -3, what we're going to end up with is the absolute value of 4v plus 6 is equal to positive 10 because the two negatives cancel out. 30 divided by 3 is 10. So this is okay. We can start with 10. Because remember what this represents, this number in the end, it's the distance from a midpoint, from a certain point. So it's the distance to the right, it's the distance to the left. A distance can't be negative. It's just a distance. It's 10 units. Okay, so if I started with -30, as far as, if there was nothing to divide or multiply or add or subtract, and that it was just 4v plus 6 equals -30, now we have a problem. It can't be negative to start like that. But make sure that you simplify it all the way before you make that decision. Alrighty? So then what we're going to do is we're going to have case 1 and case 2, and I like to color code these. So case 1, that's our positive case, and case 2 is our negative case. Because remember, this tells me I'm going to go 10 units positive, I'm going to go 10 units negative. So I have to do both of these situations. So we drop the absolute value. I have 4v plus 6 equals 10. And you always do the positive first. You're literally just taking this equation and dropping these absolute value signs. So if that very first one isn't positive, that's when you go, oh, no solution. And then the second one, we're going to do the same thing. 4v plus 6, we're dropping that absolute value, but now I'm going to go to the left, which means -10 units. So this is positive 10, this is -10. All right, so now we're just going to go through and we're going to solve both of these situations. So we're going to subtract 6 from both sides because my goal is to get v by itself. I want to know what v equals in case 1 and what v equals in case 2. So I have 4v, 6 minus 6 cancels out. 10 minus 6 gives us 4. And now since I'm multiplying by v, I'm going to do the opposite, which is divide. 4 divided by 4 cancels, and I have v equals 4 divided by 4. Technically cancels as well, but it becomes 1 on this side because there's nothing else there. So I didn't have to put 1v here. It just cancels away, and I just have the v. But on this side, since there's nothing else there, I do have to put the 1. So just be aware of that. All right. So we're going to do the same thing on case number 2. We're going to have -6. So really the steps are actually identical at this point. We're just it's going to interact a little differently on the right side because now it's negative. So I have 4v, -6 plus 6 cancels out. -10 minus 6 is -16 because they're both negative, so I had -10 and I'm going 6 more negative. So I combine and keep the negative. And then same thing I did over here. I'm going to divide by 4 so that I can get v all by itself. The 4's cancel again, and -16 divided by 4 is -4. So if I were looking at a number line, and I know they didn't give us one on this problem. Let's see, can I draw a nice straight-ish line? So I'd have 0 here, and then I'd go, if I'm going to the right, which was case 1, I would land right here on 1. So this would be my first point. And then if I were going to the left, I would land on 1, 2, 3, 4 right here. So we can see pretty quickly we're no longer just talking about a midpoint of 0. That was the very basic ones that we started with at the beginning here. But now we've switched up and now we're kind of shifting. Our midpoint is very rarely 0 in real life. That's just not going to happen. So usually it's going to be somewhere in between. So there's 5 units here, so if I jump back 1, jump back 1, jump back another 1, jump back another 1, I'm actually kind of going to land right in between here in this middle point. So it's going to be 1.5, -1.5. That's actually kind of my middle point. So it can go 5 units to the right of that, 5 units to the left of that. Sorry, 2.5 units. I said 5 units, but it's 5 total. So I can go 2.5 units this way or 2.5 units this way. So when we have more going on here, it's a little harder to just see some of the components because there's a little bit more to it than when we just have like the absolute value equals 10. This literally means the distance is 10. And that's what we're going to see on the number line. But when we have a little bit more going on in the equation, then it changes that up just a little bit as far as what we actually see in the equation. So that's doing an absolute value, kind of a little bit more advanced there. So I hope that helped, and I will see you in the next video.